Welcome to Pera's Playbook. This is your host, Alex Pera. Let's open up our playbook and see who our guest is. Please enjoy. Welcome to episode 175 of Pera's Playbook. Today we're joined by Matthew Delamater. He's an actor who's had roles in Absolution, The Tender Bar, Chicago PD, Daddy's Home 2, Tumbledown, and other projects. We're happy to have Matt here. How's it going?
It's so great to be here, Alex. I'm grateful. It's awesome to spend this beautiful spring night, chatting with you, my man. It's awesome. Good. Thanks for
Yeah,
having
happy to have you here. It is beautiful. Here in Michigan, it was 70 degrees today. The sun was shining. It was just a perfect spring day.
me. I know, dude. We were just chatting before we started that how much we appreciate those in cold weather states. So yeah, we all put the shorts on a little quick, probably. Start messing around in our gardens a little fast. It's all good. It's good. Yeah. No,
Yeah,
it's
there's a university in the town that I live in, and even in March, if it's like 40 degrees and sunny, you'll see the frat guys out on their roof, shirtless, with signs like "You honk, we drink." It's only 40 degrees, but they're out there
they're
sunbathing
ready.
on the roof, and
They're ready to rip. I know. And you gotta love that sort of like, we're just so hungry for any sort of like, vitamin D and warmth. And they're just like, come on, and it's like the beehive effect. I love that.
yeah,
Yeah.
people who don't have much of a winter, like they don't understand. Like after months of 20s and 30s, even the 40s, it's like whoa, like this is a heat wave.
Totally. Totally. I know. I was just on vacation with my family. We got a chance to go over to Europe and go over to Spain for a little bit. And, it was like chilly for them there, but it was like, it felt blistering for us. And, it was like, I love that. I love when people be like, what are you doing? You're like, you kidding me? This is like, July in Maine, So, yeah, love
That's
that.
awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. So you had a little different path to acting. And actually, I've interviewed a few actors recently who have kind of had similar things where they started in other fields. One of them started in banking. I just talked to somebody that went to college for engineering and they did all that before. Actually, one of them started in banking. He also played a little semi-pro football and then he got into acting. So
Wait a minute.
that's
I gotta hang out, I gotta hang out with that cat. Yeah. Jesus.
So, because that's kind of the similar path you had. You went to college for finance and English. You played a little semi pro football before doing acting. So you were on a different path in life.
I did. I was a rural kid from Maine. Acting. I always, I was an athlete growing up, and uh, acting was something you saw in the movies. It wasn't something, at least in my world, that was, the theater kids were cool kids. I was like, I couldn't imagine getting up and making a fool of myself in front of my friends. I was too scared of that. And and so for me, sports was that kind of arena of performance in that regard. And I think that, when I went to college and, and then kind of pursued the semi-pro football thing for a period, it was kind of clinging on to that sort of that desire to, want to be a part of something and be a part of a community or a team. And so for me, I found acting in honestly the beautiful realm of community theater, that sort of like super accessible, for the love of the game environment that, nobody thinks they're gonna, there's no delusions of grandeur, which is kind of a lovely place to perform and create art, Alex, And so I found myself as like a college graduate, with a banking job, being like, wait a minute, this is it? Like this is life, and wanting, hungry for some sort of, passion and connection. And I was fortunate enough, like so many people, that, they find that sort of bug of acting. And I remember, I'll never forget, I went to an audition for a show and loved it, and went to the first couple rehearsals, and they were like, it was a musical. And I never sang, I never performed in that way. And it was like, 4 hours, 5 hour rehearsals, because there's musical parts and then you're doing the actual acting, the actual scene work, excuse me. And I just couldn't wait to get back. I was like, oh my God, this is so much fun. And so, for a guy in Western Maine to just kind of keep keep going to auditions and auditioning for roles that I had no business getting, but the call sheet was low that day or something. I don't know, but it allowed me to kind of dabble and try and learn and grow and fail in a really, really friendly, kind of beautiful environment. And that thankfully the state of Massachusetts got some film tax incentives, and I was able to kind of start going down and auditioning for things that had a little bit wider reach. But yeah, early on, I was stoked to get that lead in the chorus, So
Yeah, that's awesome. So when you were playing football, was that like a weekend, like just playing on a weekend, like the semi-pro ball? Do you like show up every weekend, you get paid $50 a game or something, or like how
yeah,
does that work?
totally. It was, it was kind of like a starter league. It was like a New England league that was a part of we were the Southern Maine Raging Bulls. I played tight end. And it was, it was kind of one of those transitionary leagues of people trying to maybe go to college or maybe try to make it to some level of pro ball potentially, or go to the combine or something. And so it was this kind of like transitional league that I played for a couple years, and it was definitely for me, honestly, Alex, I was clinging on to a part of my personality that I probably carried with me from like those high school days, and wanting to, that was my concept of a team, of an organization. And so, when I finished that last season, I remember being like, this isn't really for me, and so it was actually like I remember that season ended, and it was right around that time where I called my high school mentor, who was an English teacher, and I knew she was involved with local theater, and her name was Sally Wood. Her name is Sally Wood. She's still with us, and I called her and said, Sally, what's going on? What's is there some production I can help out on or whatever? She's like, no, we have auditions next week. And I was like, and I was just dumb enough, Alex, to be like, okay, sure, and so but I don't know, I talk to my kids about this a lot, where like, that sort of fearlessness via ignorance can be kind of wonderful, because it literally opened up a world where for the next, I mean, to this day, that was probably what, 15 years ago, for the next, 3 or 4 years, I just did show after show after show of whoever would say yes to me, and that was my training ground. I didn't I was married at the time. We didn't have kids yet, but I wasn't really at that world where I could go to acting school. I'd already done college. I'd already kind of had a real job and a mortgage and all that jazz. I was like, sorry, man, these are the cards that I got. But that luckily, that sort of environment of just getting out there and auditioning and allowing every director and every actor I worked with to kind of be my teacher, kind of worked for me, in that regard.
Had to be helpful, having played sports, like getting, playing on a team and then going to a production, right? It's kind of a similar concept. You've got the lead, could be like the quarterback or the captain,
Yeah.
and you've got roles that fill all the way down. And to have a successful production, you have to be cohesive. You have to play as a unit. You got to work together. So I mean, there's kind of some parallels with sports and acting in that sense.
That's a great point. I think I think that's honestly what sports taught me, was that you can be a role player. You don't have to be always the one shooting the ball or whatever, scoring the goal or whatever. Like you can, everybody, especially certainly on theater, where it's a huge team approach to bring a production to life. And I would say just as much, maybe even more so on film, where you have all these people in front of the camera that the audience gets to interact with, but really the production is made with the people behind the camera just as much. The people that are manufacturing that environment that you get to play within, and that sort of these huge, almost like a film production is like a little city, of people that are all just so committed to the same purpose, and that is very much in the spirit of a good team. And I think that being able to acknowledge that and live within that environment and know that, hey, you're not always going to get the ball, you're not always going to get the shot, and there's a lot of stuff that you can't control, but you're still there, and it's the more the intention and the energy that you bring that really really adds to it. I agree with you. I think that that's those parallels are really true. Yeah.
I think you bring up a good point, like talking about all the kind of the behind the camera stuff. I feel like a lot of people don't talk about that, right? They see a movie come out and it's all like, oh, what big actors in it and all this stuff. But like you said, there's so much behind the scenes stuff, especially now with AI and CGI and the special effects work that's done. But then, I mean, you've got people in the business that have been doing camera work for so long and they're just amazing at it and they can set up the perfect shots. And none of the films we watch would be possible without any of those people doing all this extra, putting in the hours once the film is filmed and doing all that post production stuff. And there's just so much that goes into it that I feel like really doesn't get talked about, or maybe not, people don't get as much credit as they deserve. I've talked to a lot of stunt people and the same thing. They're kind of behind the scenes, like, okay, they did all this, but some other actor maybe gets credit for, because they're the ones that people see doing the stunt.
No, totally. I mean, I think more and more, luckily, I think that there is a trend towards, I think hopefully people are getting a little bit more of their due. But no, I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, like a film does not happen without anyone on that set. From the PA to the stunt person, the costume designer. I love talking about costume designers because, like, as an actor, the first person you usually meet on a set is your costume designer. And they're with you, hair and makeup. They're with you and you're like most vulnerable. And so, like, they're there for you as in some respects as much as a director is, and yet, there's so many unsung heroes that are just film, the beautiful films that we love and the shows that we love to watch and binge would not exist without the art department, without the location scout, without the people that are paying attention to all these little details that, yeah, you as the actor, you're doing your own thing. You're hoping to deliver in the moment and hopefully give good puzzle pieces for the editor to tell the story with, but you wouldn't even be there if it wasn't for, the set department, or the lighting, the lighting, crew, and all, it goes on and on and on. And so I think that, and anybody that's been on had the, been fortunate enough to be on a film set knows that, like, everybody in those buildings in that room is just as important as the next. And so I hope I'm hearing it more and more and more in the world, and I hope people do continue to grow that appreciation because, like you said, we see the finished product. You know what I mean? We see the White Lotus, we see the adolescence, we see the beautiful films that we love, and those things would not exist without everybody on those scrolling credits. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I love seeing how things were made. Like I'm a huge Game of Thrones fan,
mm,
and there's a lot of behind the scenes. Like I own all the seasons, so when I'm done watching a season, I'll look at all the behind the scenes stuff, and they go in. I think HBO did a really good job of kind of showing all the different pieces that were
yeah,
needed to make the show. And it's like, oh, here's a snow guy. That's what he does. He specializes in snow. And then I looked him up. I mean, that's what this guy does in movies. He like takes care of snow for the biggest movies you've ever heard of. And it's like,
amazing.
wow, that's like something I never would have ever thought of. Is like there's a specific guy that's his job. And it's an important job, especially if you're shooting winter scenes or winter movies. Like, you just don't
I
even
mean,
think
I mean,
about some of
Alex, this is the world of make believe, right? Like
it.
when we have so many, adult human beings that are taking make believe so seriously, that's how you create magic. One of my favorite directors in all the world is Wes Anderson, and to see what the amount of work that goes in to creating those frames, it's like, yeah, like everybody is so important in that regard. So I love that. So, like, yeah, the snow guy is a star, man, because especially nowadays we're such discerning audiences where, like, if that's a great example where you're like, I don't know, the snow didn't really look real, and, like we're brutal, right? So, like, those guys are critical. Yeah, no, it's true. It's a good point.
Yeah. It is kind of funny, right? Like there's so many people who watch talking about snow, like Hallmark movies. It's like, well,
Yeah,
they filmed that in California in the middle of summer. It's all like, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It's you're like, gotcha,
Yeah.
whatever. This is on some set somewhere, guys. I don't believe you.
Right.
Exactly. No, you're right. You're right. So no, it's a we need all the snow people we can get, in my view. So
Yeah.
I agree.
I even noticed that in the movie you had a small part in, Daddy's Home too. There's a few scenes with some snow throughout the movie, and it's like, yeah, that's not real. You know?
I mean, I get it. It's hard. It's hard to work with live weather. I at the
Oh
same
yeah.
time, you gotta pick and choose. It's tricky, But luckily, we're filming with Will Ferrell in it. They can make a lot of choices and still come away well, okay. That
Yeah,
guy's
I don't know anybody, watching that movie and like, oh, geez, I hated it because the snow didn't look good. Like, I personally, it's one of my favorite movies. I just think it's hilarious. I absolutely love
Dude,
that movie.
you're absolutely. I was so fortunate to have a very small, small role in that, but in a lovely scene. But it was like those were one of those days where you show up and you're like, what? I'm gonna, I get to work with these people today. Like this is crazy. Yeah, and like I love talking about that project because, Will Ferrell's everybody's hero, right? That guy's the man. Right? Everybody loves him, and you always like in this world when you get to come into contact with some of your heroes, you're always like, you're a professional, you'll work with whoever, however, whatever it works. But there's a part of your brain where you're like, man, I hope they're good people. And he was one of those people that you're like, oh, thank God, he's just like a gem, just like such a delight, so talented, like so cool to see somebody like that where they don't turn the camera off until he's done because you never know what genius is going to come out of his, and it was just what a cool front row seat to get to, that this world kind of allows you to get once in a while. That's how that felt that way for me.
Yeah, yeah, you had a nice little scene there. You're the gun salesman. Mel
Yeah.
Gibson's trying to buy the grandson a shotgun, and then
Yeah.
Will Ferrell comes over. No, 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 we're a
Yeah.
gun-free family. And then Mark Wahlberg's kind of just sitting there, stuck between the two of them,
Yeah.
as he kind of is in the whole movie with Mel Gibson's character trying to get between them and start a rift. But I think that, that's just, it's such a fun dynamic for a movie, right?
Totally.
You've got two different father and sons with totally different backgrounds, and
Yeah.
stick them in a cabin for a weekend.
I know. And those guys with their talent, uh, Will is such an incredible improv, artist, and so like that was so when I'm a supporting actor, I'm a day player, I'm a week player. I get I get those are the roles you start out with, and so you always there's a sense of like you obviously want to add value, you want to be as real and earnest and good as you can be, but it's not your moment, you know what I mean? You're not going to start stealing, but that was one of my favorite memories because at the end of he and I ended that scene. At the end of every scene, he would do something different and throw it back and expect you to play with him. And it was like I went home that night and talked to my wife, and I was like, I got to kind of improv with Will Ferrell today. Like, and I don't care what ends up in the movie or whatever, none of that you can control, but you were like, just from like an experience as a human being, in the world, you're like, that happened. Oh my God. And and something as an actor I always try to remember and key in on is people's generosity as an actor. You don't have to be generous, especially big celebrities, like it's their scene, they're the leads, I'm there for you. But like for someone of that kind of stature to be like, he was always concerned how the scene landed on you, and he was very, he didn't have any of that sort of like, ego in that regard. I was so impressed by that, and it shows. He's able to really squeeze wonderful things and mine wonderful things out of every scene because he's looking at it like new and raw every time. And I always marveled at that from that couple days on set.
Yeah. It's always nice as a fan. I feel like you think the same kind of thing you mentioned. Like, if you're going to go work with a big star, you hope they're a nice person. It's the same thing as a fan. Like, is it real? Like, how
Right.
they are, or are they fake and actually they're a jerk? So when you hear those firsthand occurrences, it's like, no, they actually are very kind. They
Oh,
actually are genuine. It makes you feel better to support them because
totally.
who wants to support a jerk?
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, no, well, yeah, Will Ferrell's a gem, man, in my book. I mean, I'm add to the cacophony of people who would ever say that. So, but yeah, I felt so lucky to get to be in that guy's work.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Well, you've got to work with quite a few big stars on different projects. Obviously, all those guys, but Liam Neeson on a project, Ben Affleck, Jason Sudeikis, bunch of just giants of the industry. And another, I guess, way you could relate it to sports, right? When you're playing a sport, you want to play with the best athletes possible. And when you're an actor, I can imagine that you want to be able to act with the best and just take that in, witness it firsthand, and just soak in everything that they're doing, and add that to your acting or how you do things or whatnot.
Absolutely. No, it's a really great point, Alex. Acting is listening, right? It's being present in a space and trying to make these worlds that writers and folks create as real and earnest as you can. And so when you get people who are really good at that, standing opposite you, it's it's a joy, dude. It's like getting I think about the Tender Bar, getting to go to work every day with Ben Affleck and be directed by George Clooney, who's giving you your acting advice, and Ty Sheridan and Michael Braun and Max Casella, those guys, those you get this sense of like, all right, don't drop the ball for sure, but you're also like it forces you to be better. It makes you better. And I think that's to use that sports analogy, it's very similar. They raise your game, and I think that's always incredibly exciting to get to be a part of that.
Yeah,
Liam Neeson, I mean, that guy like looks at you and you're just like, whoa, this is he whispers and you're like, you're leaning in, and so it's like those are the moments, like you said, in our world, at least in my experience, in my world with acting, there's you get to be comfortable with so many things that you can't control, and even though you wish you could, in some ways, you from the audition process to the final edit of a project, and so you at least in my experience, I try to live within that realm of what I believe I can control, which is what I bring to the day, the energy, the work, the preparation. And then, the goal is to just try and enjoy it, while you're there. And so like I've been very fortunate in that regard that like, Liam Neeson, incredible human being, amazing, justifies all the hero worship that I've had my whole life watching that guy. Same thing with George and with Clooney and Ben, and it's these guys they're stars for a reason. They're incredibly talented, they're generous, and they're intelligent, but they're great people. It's you don't get to be that level, in my opinion, without being really good people. And so that's always, as a fan as well as a professional, that's always a joy to get to kind of discover.
yeah. I think that's a good point, kind of for life in general. You mentioned like just kind of controlling what you can control. Like if you go to work, you can't control how your coworkers are, how they're going to treat you. You can control how you respond to them. If somebody's super crabby and you respond crabby, it's like, okay, now everybody's crabby. But if somebody comes at you with some negative energy and you respond positive, that can. So I think like just kind of in life in general, that's it. Like a really good point that you made about just controlling what you can control. Like, don't worry about the stuff you can't control because you can't control it. Just like do what you can, and generally there's better results.
Well, it's like any job. I think, acting, performing, anything like that. I'm sure musicians, artists of many, many different stripes. There can be a lot of stress involved in those environments. Everybody's, got maybe, high stakes or stakes that they perceive, and they want to do a good job. And so people are, there can be a higher stress environment in that regard. So I think the more you can, be centered in that way to say, hey, look, I can bring what I bring to the table, and then it's I can make choices on how I interact with this environment. And I think especially I think film sets, stages. I think those are classic examples for really how you can affect an environment in that way. And there's tons of examples in the world where people haven't done that. But I do think, it's like when I travel in the airport with my kids, I'm always like, guys, this is one of those places where you got to be like extra kind, extra nice, because everybody's grumpy. You know what I mean? I've always felt like that about different environments where you're like, look, don't be the asshole. To like, don't give anybody a reason to shift their stress onto you, man. You know what I mean? Like, so. I try to live by that when I we're actors, we're artists, like every job we think is our last job, so we're like, well, shit, I'm gonna enjoy this, so at least that's my approach. Maybe it's because I found it later and I'm like, have they figured me out yet? Am I, gonna find out that I'm actually just a banker from Maine, you know?
That's
But who
funny.
knows? That's probably my insecurity talking to me.
Yeah. Well, I think that's kind of a good segue. You're not just an actor. You've got all kinds of things that you're doing. Um, and we can talk about a few of them. One of them, I think I was reading your bio on your website. Did it say something about beekeeping?
Yeah, man. For the last, so I did a play, maybe 6, 7 years ago, this beautiful play called Constellations for a theater company up here in Maine, a Space Gallery with a wonderful director, Sean Mishaw. And it's a play set in the multiverse, and the character there's two. It's a two-person play, and male and female roles, and the male character is Roland, is a beekeeper, and so I studied I kind of researched it. I've always been familiar, curious about it, but I had an opportunity right around that time where someone's like, "Well, I have some hives," and so I bought some hives and I just kind of dove in, and I honestly I fell in love with it. I fell in love with just like the kind of the beautiful chaos of raising this colony of ferocious and amazing female creatures that are just like this incredible communities. And it's been great with kids and stuff like that. I will note that I'm probably like the least type A beekeeper there is in the world. Like there's many people that super geek out about it and do it. I'm a little more like chill beekeeper. I kind of let things roll, but it's fun. It's fun. So yeah, it's we were actually just harvesting some honey this morning from a hive that didn't make it over the winter, and it's just such a it's just such a cool thing to get to do as a dad with your kids and kind of dispel some fears, and you end up with some honey, man. And I like to give wrap gifts, something from Maine or something that is personal to me. So usually if I get lucky to do a movie or a film or something, usually somebody gets to go home with some honey. So that's kind of fun too.
How much honey do you get?
It depends. It depends. I only keep about 2 to 3 hives a year, so it's not a crazy amount of bees. But you can get 5 to 10 gallons. If you have a good out of a good harvest. And technically they say it lasts for hundreds, if not 1,000 years. So you can keep it for a bit.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
it's
That's
not.
more than I was expecting when you said two or three hives, 5 to 10 gallons. That's a decent amount of honey.
Yeah, and I don't know. I'm probably not the best beekeeper in the world too. So somebody could probably do a little bit better than me. What I don't know about beekeeping could fill volumes, but it's I don't know. We have some land and with some kind of like field and farmland, and so it's really good for the crops and good for the flowers and stuff. So it seems like a really nice symbiotic relationship, good partnership. Seems like you know, I like to see him flying. There's some beautiful zenness to it. Talk about energy and what you bring, your vibes. That's an instant environment where if you walk in, if I'm like stressed out or if I'm grumpy or whatever, like the bees know. They like they're like agitated and they're like, what's wrong? They kind of they reflect it. But if you're chill and you're having an easygoing time, like they reflect that. So it's really interesting. And since they can sting you, there's some instant feedback there if you don't play your outfit right. So it's interesting. So I like it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you're so right. Like, I mean, bee populations have been declining, and there's this. I mean, nature needs bees. Like, they
Yeah.
need that relationship you were talking about. So I know, like, there's a lot of farmers that'll do what they can to try to increase the bee populations on their farms and stuff. So yeah, I mean, it's totally, um, just and it's kind of funny what you mentioned about how they can like kind of feed off
It's
your
fear.
energy. They're
They
not the
smell
guys you want to
fear,
piss
man.
off. You
It's
know?
really fascinating. It's like a good director. They smell fear, baby. You got to go in, you got to go in. It's good training. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's you got to have your, you got to you're from a rural area. You got to spin your plates, baby. You got to have a few things, up your sleeve. Yeah, so.
Yeah. You're also the president of the Norway Main Opera House group, and you guys, your goal is to kind of refurbish like well, how old is it? A pretty old opera house.
Yeah, it's almost 100, 130-year-old, beautiful old performance hall and opera house that it's a wonderful nonprofit near my hometown in Norway, Maine. Uh, and I'm, president. I'm the one that drew the short straw. You know what I mean? So like, the whole board is really, really remarkable and talented. I'm lucky to be a part of the team. But we were lucky to get some federal grant money recently, over the last few years, and we've developed the first floor, and now we're kind of focusing on the 500 seat, beautiful old kind of like hanging U-shaped floating balcony that for me, my connection to it, to be honest with you, Alex, just is I wouldn't be an actor if I didn't have access to a rural, Western Maine stage. If I didn't get to go and experience this thing that is storytelling and acting within my community, I would have never probably done it, and that part of my life really would have maybe potentially never existed. And so to me, that's having those sort of gateways and those portals for people to experience music or dance or theater or or community gatherings or whatever is in my, especially in rural parts of our world, so critical. Because you live in a city, there's tons of those things, right? And then it's a matter of variety and what flavor you're interested in. But when you're from rural communities, you don't always, there's sometimes it's just zero. And so that's what kind of the history of it, and kind of the fact that having those kind of touchstones in a community can be really good for the whole community, regardless of your feelings on the arts or, performance. And so that's kind of what's been motivating me on that project. So I feel really lucky to get to be a part of it. So, selfishly, I hope that I get to, maybe do a show or two on the stage one day. Yes, I fully admit that. But I think that, yeah, but I think that what it can do for a small rural community is more important, and what really I think everybody's striving for. So we're hopefully we'll be, if the ducks line up in a row, hopefully by this fall we'll be seeing some cranes on the street and doing some real work. So it'd be kind of cool if that happens.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. There's a local theater in a town very near here, and it's an old theater, from back in the mining days. And yeah, I mean, it's just super important part of the community. It's a beautiful theater, and they've always got various productions or things going on, and just it's important to have access to various types of art performances for people to go and experience things, especially like you said, in a rural community. I mean, you can go any city and there's countless shows any night of the week of all sorts and kinds. But when you live in that small town, and maybe your choices are driving 4 hours to the city to go to a show, it's nice to have that community theater.
Yeah, and I think that we're, especially more and more today, I think that, maybe post pandemic, or with the rise of being so connected to our devices and stuff, I think that we still as human beings crave being in a space with one another to experience something, and I say all the time, well, we're trying to build a beautiful vessel. I love theater, I love dance, I can imagine dozens of things in there that I'd love to see, but it's not really about that. It's about what brings people together, and about what makes them feel something. In my opinion, that's what those spaces, and that's what the arts has the power of doing. And I think that, you see that in the, film cinema these days, like forever, is cinema dead, the streamers and everything like that. But yet we're learning that for the right projects, for certain things, it does bring people out and bring people together. Because I personally believe that people want to experience things, next to someone else. And I hope that continues. My last little, I will stop talking about the last little thing that I love to talk about this project in particular. It was built in the late 1800s, and it burned down in around 1900. And within 8 months, the community rebuilt it. It was like the first structure they rebuilt, and that was in 1900. So like clearly human beings even then were like, no, we need this thing. You know what I mean? And so like I hope I feels intrinsic to me, that maybe whatever's going on inside these spaces will change, but the fact that we want to gather and celebrate and do things together, I hope doesn't. That's the ethos for me.
Yeah, I agree. I think, yeah, there's streaming and there's all this more accessible at home, but it's fun to go to a movie with your friends or to go to a production or a concert or whatever you're going to, a live, real in-person event. There's something about, even if it is just a movie and it's not a play. I mean, there's something about going to the theater
Totally.
and saying like, "Hey, I watched that movie in theaters." It's different than, "Hey, I watched it on my couch." I mean,
And you still to this day hear people say that, oh, I saw that live. Like
yeah.
there's this like kinship there. Like I hope that doesn't die. I love that. And I love that, I love that people still seem to be keeping that alive. And I personally, I'm a pretty optimistic guy, but I'm hopeful that, that a piece of that will always be there. So
And I think people are starting to, there's a lot of people that are going retro with a lot of different stuff. You see it with like vinyl coming back and all these different things. And I think in a way too, it's like, yeah, we had this pandemic era where everyone was inside watching stuff on their couch. But now, like you said, we're coming out of that. People want that interaction again, especially, like young kids that maybe they were in college during the pandemic. They didn't have that personal experience that their parents had when they were in college. So that's what they want right now. They want to be able to do stuff outside. They want to go to events. They want to go to festivals. They want to, live your life outside of that electronic bubble. I mean, I think we're kind of seeing that the cycles going back around.
I agree. No, I think you're right. I think people they want something tangible. They want something that I think that's the trade-off in that digital space is it becomes kind of so ubiquitous that the personality, the personal connection is lost. And so you're seeing that with like film and photography and and different types of, like you said, mediums where people are clamoring for the old tactile kind of world. And I think that speaks to this point we're kind of discussing. Hopefully.
Yeah, for sure. Why don't we wrap up the episode talking about beer? I know you do some finances for like a brewery. You do some consulting work for a brewery in your area.
Yeah, so around the time I've been the CFO for Oxbow Brewing Company for about the last 10 years, which is this wonderful farmhouse ale, European inspired American farmhouse ale brewery in Maine. We started in Newcastle, Maine, and locations in Portland and Oxford. And right around I was kind of in the time of my acting where I'd left banking and left finance. I kind of said, look, I'm gonna lean into acting full time. My wife's a photographer. I also photograph. I shoot with her, and around that time, I had a beer TV show on YouTube called Local Brew TV. And so it was like a travel channel esque kind of show. We'd go around, we'd go to a brewery, and then we'd go to a bar or restaurant, and we'd kind of like talk about the brand in those two environments. And so I got to know a lot of brewers during that time, and one of them was the owner of Oxbow, and I'm a big fly fisherman. He's like a legit fly fisherman, and so we became friends in that regard. And so right around that time, I was acting, and my wife was pregnant with her first child, and that company was going through kind of like a partnership shakeup. And so, we were fishing one day, and he's like, I need a business guy, and he's like, "Do you want to be my business guy?" And I'm like, I don't know anything about beer. He's like, that's okay. And I'm like, well, I'm an actor, and I might go to auditions from time. He's like, I don't care, that's great. And so it was this really wonderful kismet kind of situation where, like I think, obviously the dream is that I don't have to do anything but act, but the reality is that having that sort of freedom and flexibility to do projects that you want to do, to especially with my kids and stuff these days, like if I'm going to leave them for a period of time, I want it to be something that I can feel good about doing that. So Oxbow was this beautiful, wonderful opportunity where it was a bunch of artists, bunch of cool skateboard punk artists, people that were way cooler than me, doing beautiful, really cool things that I got to be a part of, and use that kind of wacky, whatever, for better, for worse, banker brain that I had gained for some good. And yeah, that was 10 years ago, man. And it's been this lovely kind of relationship of getting to be celebrated when the artist in me did well, and then in the times where things were quieter, my civilian life was also kind of fun and creative and part of something special too. So I feel really lucky that I could kind of live in those two worlds, because I have a lot of respect, Alex, for my friends and people that in any artistic pursuit that are like all in on that one thing, because it can be really challenging and hard sometimes, and I have so much respect for them. So I feel really lucky that I got to kind of have my foot in both worlds a little bit, while I I always joke, I'm just trying to keep my cards in the game, baby. I'm just like, I'm trying to just keep that dream alive, and in the meantime, let my kids see somebody that they can be proud of, no matter what. So yeah. So you got to come out to Maine sometimes, and you drink some good beer, because you're in Michigan. You guys got some good beer, so you guys know what good beer is out there. So, but you come out to Maine anytime, brother.
Yeah,
We'll show you around for sure.
for sure. What's your beer of choice? Are you on the IPA train, or what do you like?
So, no judgment, all beer. I'm a fan. It's a difficult spirit to create and create well. So I have mad respect for anybody that's doing it. I think probably, because the yeast is such, is what speaks to you in beer. I'm a saison. I'm a wild fermentation kind of guy, and probably because of my Oxbow roots, 10 years of drinking the same yeast, it does that to you. So I'm a ice cold, farmhouse ale, or a beautiful kind of European inspired saison on a summer day kind of guy. So,
Yeah,
yeah, good, nice crisp lager. The IPAs are good. They're just a little too calorically dense for me. It's a little hard. I can't drink too many of them, but I want to
yeah,
sometimes. But oof, I
yeah.
won't
I
fit in.
like
I won't fit in any of my costumes. So.
I like a few like the fruitier IPAs, some of the hazies. My dad, he loves IPAs. The hoppier, the better. He's looking at an IPA. He wants the IBUs to be as high as possible. But like, that's what he's looking at. Oh, it's only 52. That's not good enough. Like, oh man, that's 90 or 100. Like,
If he's
awesome.
looking at IBUs, he's already in a different latitude, bro. No, no, he wants to just be punched in the face with hops. I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
But that's not my jam. Like I'm like a, especially now in the summer, I'm like a fruity wheat ale, like that's my jam. And I love craft breweries. If I'm traveling anywhere, I look like, oh, do they have breweries? Like I want to go to a local brewery, and do they have food? Even better, like get a nice craft brew, and oh, maybe they've got an outdoor sitting space, and like that's a perfect evening when you're traveling, is a nice beer and a burger out on a patio at a local craft brew.
Yeah, I mean the beer garden is the world's pub. You know what I mean? It's like that sort of space where everybody's welcome, and it's there's hopefully there's some good food. Hopefully there's a good beer that you're something you can drink, and we can you can come together on. That's what I do love. I think that's why it's been such a successful or proliferated space, is that people People love to come together. They love this, brewers are interesting, they're creative, they're artists, but they're also scientists, you know what I mean? It's a fascinating space. Most of them started, most of the ones, the great ones in Maine started as home brewers, just trying out stuff in their garages, you know what I mean? And I think everybody can get behind that, and I love that about uh the space. It's really
Yeah.
cool.
And you have to get a t-shirt if you go to a brewery. So then people ask you about it. Like, hey, where's that? And then you tell them the story. Or you have to, get some beer to bring and you have your friends try. Like, hey, I went to this great brewery. You've got to try this because it's so
Totally.
good.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You gotta watch out with those IPAs, they don't last as long. So you gotta get yourself some good mixed firm beers that'll sit for a while in your cellar, baby. I'm gonna have to sell you. I'm gonna have to send you something, Alex, now. Jeez, and watch out. You're gonna get a shit.
Awesome. Well, Matt, I appreciate you coming
No, I
on the
appreciate you.
podcast. It's great chatting with you.
Same here, man. Appreciate what you're doing, and thanks so much for having me. Yeah.
Thanks for listening. Please stay tuned for more episodes soon.